Greetings, family members. Thank you for joining us. My name is Martin Garcia. I am a licensed chemical dependency counselor here at La Hacienda. As we dive into these discussions, we're going to find that although they're difficult topics, we need to explore more of that. We want to be supportive as much as possible and getting educated about this, education about addiction, recovery, how we've been impacted, and what we can do about this. Very important factors in the family being able to recover. And so when it comes to codependency, and I hope that you guys can see the slides well, there are a number of things to think about as you're going through these. We'll have some moments to be able to look at that and then have some discussion later. It's a subject that a lot of people have many definitions for. And what we're essentially trying to do is get out of this codependency dilemma, this trap that we've fallen into, and find peace and serenity in our lives. And so we think that, again, putting a spotlight on this is going to be able to help us immensely. So what is codependency? And am I codependent? This is going to have to be a journey of self-discovery. Just because you are, you have someone in your life who's an alcoholic or an addict does not make you codependent. But it's very easy to fall into those codependent behaviors without even knowing it. And we are going to take back control over those things. There's a lot of definitions for codependency, and as you can see there, my favorite one, I would say, or the easiest one, is absence of relationship with yourself. Because this condition, this dilemma that we fall into, we can lose sight of ourselves, our interest in our own well-being. And we end up taking care of other people and end up with resentments as a result. And that's not good for anyone. And so the hope, again, is to find some relief, knowing that not all is lost. There's good news, there's light at the end of the tunnel. We are going to educate ourselves and put the spotlight on this and see what we can do. We're going to be met with some resistance about this because you're going to have to practice assertiveness, and you might end up with people may be guilt tripping you, as some of you guys have heard before. Obsessing over our loved one's behavior is not something that we wanted to do or take control of their lives, but when someone in the family is out of control, and in this case, your loved one, because of addiction, fell out of control, lost control, someone in the family instinctively dives in or jumps in to take care of the situation for the sake of the family. And as a result, we end up being, we never wanted to be in control in the first place. And so you might hear your loved one or others say, stop being so controlling. Let me lead my own life and let me make my own decisions. If that sounds familiar to you, you're in the right place. How hard is it not to obsess over someone else, though? When we can't leave, we can't go to work without having someone who is hurting in our thoughts. someone who's in pain. And that leaves us with a sense of sometimes even impending doom. We're just not comfortable. And we can hide it for a while, but eventually it just radiates about us. And we end up doing things that we may regret later and being resentful. So if your life has been controlled by someone else's addiction, let's dive into this and see what more we can do about it. And so we're looking at some of the behaviors of codependency, and this is just a list of things. There's probably many more, but again, if we know that we've become controlling, one of the many challenges is to delegate those responsibilities back to your loved one. And we must be confident that they are able to overcome these things. Because if we don't, we're going to be mistrustful and think that only we can do it. And in the process, we're going to end up caretaking and always being hypervigilant about situations, danger around every corner. And that's not true. We end up being perfectionists. No one else can do it better. We do it faster, quicker, and we know that it's done, and that's how we find relief. So we must be confident that our loved one is able to take control of their lives and overcome this thing. And then again, we learn to let go and detach, and with love, of course. We don't want to give codependent people a bad rap. Sometimes there's a lot of misunderstandings. People believe that codependent people are underproductive, which is in fact the opposite. We are very productive. We do things that would take normal people down, but we can't keep it up forever. We're people pleasers and lose sight of what we need along the way. And not only ourselves, but other people in our lives. So it makes sense that we pay attention to the person who's struggling, no doubt about it. But the reality is these people, our loved ones, your loved one here in treatment is perfectly capable of reclaiming their life from addiction. If not, the end result, we're going to get sick and tired and end up with a feeling of hopelessness. And that's not a place that we want to be, for sure. I'm sure you can understand that. Why do we become codependent? There's evidence that this may have started long ago behaviors from our family of origin. And sometimes we just fall into a relationship that is codependent where one is giving more than the other. And that's not a healthy thing when it's supposed to be give and take, and the relationship is supposed to be fluid. We're supposed to be able to count and rely on one another, not lie on each other, and one taking the burden of the whole thing. So we've been conditioned maybe in our upbringing to behave a certain way, to do things that are maybe even impossible. And eventually we want to reduce the pain. Nobody wants to see anybody hurting and the family hurting. So we hide these things. People say we sweep them under the rug, things like that. We're walking on eggshells, essentially. So we want to reduce the pain, ease the crisis, and of course, assist the addicted person, the family member, to protect the family. These are some rules set up within families that contribute to the codependency, and I highlighted some of my own. And you can take a look at some of these and study that and find where you fall into, if you fall into any of these behaviors. When I was a kid, it was not okay to talk about problems. What problem? There is no problem. Even recalling now, as I speak with my mother, we had an alcoholic father and a mother who worried way too much, and that spilled over onto us. When we have discussions, how differently we see things, even to date, that never happened. Um, it is a common thing that my mom would say. Uh, Communication was best if indirect. One person acts as a messenger between two others, um, called triangulation. It's not okay to play or be playful. So it wasn't a terrible childhood. There was a lot of sadness though, and hurt and pain, and like a lot of other family members. And now sometimes we we get no joy out of life, and we need to have some fun along the way. So if there's something that I say along the way, or one of us says along the way that might be um, funny, it's not meant to be undermining to your situation. Um, it's just to take the edge off of things and know that you're not alone. And there's some comfort in that, knowing that we're not alone in this. There's other people who are struggling with codependency just like we are. We all are responsible for taking care of ourselves ultimately. So how do we do it? You're at the right place. We're taking a look at what codependency is, and individual therapy would be good for family members to start looking at some of those things. You'd be surprised and amazed, maybe pleasantly surprised at some of the things that can surface from doing some therapy. Al-Anon can be very helpful for family members. It's a good place to start. There's a lot of other support groups for family members. We got to prioritize ourselves, and we can't stress that enough. It's a challenge, making ourselves first, putting ourselves first. When we say, and you've heard the term or the analogy of being on an airplane, when the gas mask comes down, not the gas mask, strike that, the oxygen mask. Who do we put it on first? And our instinct is to put it on someone else first, but really we need to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others out there. Loving and caring for people are not symptoms of codependency. Loving and caring for people are qualities that human beings have or should have, and care for one another. But can we take it too far? We can. And in Al-Anon, they'll say, you'll hear things like, you're loving them to death. And it's not things that we want to hear, but it is the truth. If it's your truth, if we've done some of these codependent things. So we don't just take a look at the mistakes that we made. We didn't know any better. But once we know more, and understand more, then we do better. Here's something that I think will help as we go through this. Melody Beatty, one of the leading people on research and on codependency. Today, I will stop trying to control my relationships. I will participate at a reasonable level and let the other person do the same. I can let go, knowing that the relationship will find its own life or not, and that I don't have to do all the work, only my share. I like that and appreciate that, and I hope you can appreciate it as well. Just take a moment to take that in. So we're switching gears a little bit into what enabling is. How do we know when we're being helpful or we're enabling? And you can see the screen, of course, protecting others from experiencing the full impact of the consequences. It allows the person to be irresponsible. People do take this advantage of a person when we do too much, and we end up feeling like we're doormats. It is fear-driven, fueled by manipulation, and driven by fear. And how do we overcome that? First, we look at the harm caused. As you read some of these things, bullet points, it's hard to take in. It does interrupt the natural consequences. It's unfair to a person's personal growth. We must allow our loved one to have respect and dignity, and again, be confident that they can take this on, their recovery on, and be successful. Without the consequences, people do not often want to change. And that's a hard thing. There's all these what ifs that are going through our minds. What if? So, yes, consequences can be painful, hurtful. Someone may lose something along the way. Financial security, even. Go to jail. I've seen that before. Someone may even lose their life. But as you can read, we can not permanently prevent any of these things from happening through enabling. Only a person's personal recovery can do that. So one of the questions that we get asked a whole lot is, what is the worst thing that can happen if I let go, if I detach, and I start taking care of myself? Someone could lose their life. Is that the worst thing that could happen? It certainly is a very difficult thing to think about. But I'm going to say something to you that I know to be true. We don't want people, our loved ones especially, going hungry and living on the street under a bridge somewhere. But the reality is that most addicts and alcoholics die, unfortunately, in a warm bed with a belly full of food. And that's the truth. Have you enabled? Have you? Here are some questions to ask yourselves as you take that in. We can look at that. And see which ones we fall into. For me, I've done all of those. And it's very easy to fall back into those predicaments if I don't watch myself. So it's a constant thing. But we can overcome it. And then we don't want to go too far to the extreme to where I'd hate to be having a terrible day at work like most people have. Everyone has had a terrible day, and I'll go home and ask, tell my wife, today's just a bad day. I got cut off in traffic, got all the red lights, all of these different things. And for my wife to say, well, good luck with that, because I'm not codependent and you need to get yourself out of that. We can go too far. It's a balance that we're trying to find. I rely on her and count on her for certain things, and she relies on me for certain things. We have certain obligations toward each other, but we're not responsible for making sure that they're okay, because if they're not okay, we're not okay. We'll find that balance as we work on our recovery. So what now? We're going to talk more about boundaries extensively, and that's something to think about. So identify the boundaries that you want to establish. Make sure they're realistic, permeable, meaning you know where they end and you begin, and we can be flexible. And some boundaries are kind of going to have to be non-negotiable. Return to the focus on yourself, whatever means necessary. A good tool, again, is the good old-fashioned serenity prayer. If something comes your way, we can simply take a step aside and say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. We're going to be able to express our feelings with one another and not walk on eggshells anymore. Spiritual healing might be another way to do this, or an additional component. And we're going to get boundaried up, and we're going to feel better, and we're going to have some fun along the way, and we're going to see ourselves grow. Painful at first, maybe, for most, but as we get into it, and along the way, we're going to find more peace and less anxiety. I think we all want that. Here's something that you can say for yourselves, and this is, affirmations that I have to remind myself. I like other people to affirm me, but I have to say these things to myself. You are worth it. I am worth it. Others people's happiness is their responsibility. Nothing wrong trying to get someone out of a bad mood, but if someone has a bad day, is that a terrible thing? Not really. Everybody gets to have a bad day. And maybe that even helps us explore some things. There's something good in that even. We need to watch our yeses and our nos, know that we can say yes and no. And most importantly, watching our automatic yeses when we actually mean no. We just take on too much. We'll have trouble along the way, but we'll get better at it. And it might feel like we're being selfish, but it's not. And you might feel or think that other people might see you as a selfish person, but that's far from the truth. We're going to let honesty be our guide. Let the truth be our guide about things. Breaking it up into the last piece, detachment. We've been detached in a way, and now we're going to learn some new ways to be reattached or attached in a healthier way, so that we can have better relationships along the way. So as you can read the PowerPoint, the bullet points, I'll let you take that in for a moment. And we'll move on. we're eventually going to find out that we can't do this for anybody else. People's recovery is their own work to do, and our recovery is our own work to do. Chemical dependency is what's killing the alcoholic and the addict. Codependency, enabling, is something that is taking us down. We allow the natural consequences to happen. We'll trust the process and trust that our higher power can help us overcome these things. I think we kind of got into this because I like Maya Angelou. Do the best that you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. I like it. So remember, I didn't cause it. These 3 C's are very important, and some of you may know them already, but they're a good reminder that I didn't cause it. I can't control it, and I certainly can't cure it. We're going to talk about boundaries in another section. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you for your diligence in this. Hope this was helpful. I'm sure we'll be talking again soon, and thank you for attending.